there's a secret underlying strategy. Call it a weapon, even a deadly weapon, a lethal weapon, that people use. It's a weapon that they use first and foremost against themselves, but also, like anything that's been imposed upon oneself, it doesn't stay there. It expands, radiates outward to the world around oneself. So it harms the person involved where this is generated, and it also has a terrible impact on the world around society, one's own family, of course, one's own close-knit circle of people, as well as society at large. This, what I'm referring to, is the seeking of, or for, the longing for acceptance. This is a very pervasive, very toxic, very poisonous drive. It's deep often. It can be traced to the way one was brought up, so one's upbringing as a child, the educational milieu or environment where they grew up, what they were exposed to, what they gathered as far as data is concerned, information coming in. If you want this, then you need to do this. How was the relationship with the caregivers? How did you grab attention? But why? Why do we seek attention? And which turns into a conduit, a path that takes us to something even deeper. Acceptance. Attention, then acceptance. But why? There's got to be an underlying, almost like a feedback loop, that's really playing a wheel that's constantly in motion, that runs through these mechanisms of behavior. And that is simply to feel you're part of the crowd, that you're not alone, that you're not tossed out, that you're not just there, neglected, abandoned, meaning you have happiness. You're not tossed out of the cave, that archetypal cave that as a collective, as social beings, we desperately needed to survive. Our ancestors lived in such environments. So the number of people around you, even if you had only one person to rely upon, they had another person to rely upon. That was you. So you would at least have someone looking out for you, watching you back to see if there's something coming, the saber-tooth, something. And similarly with the fire, with the food, if you couldn't make the hunt to bring food to the cave, to the tribe, to the family, then at least others have brought something. So it might not be a lot, but definitely it was safety in numbers. So this is deep in the psyche, in the emotions of a person. So it's not necessarily a terrible, terrible thing. However, when it is guided by ignorance, then it's absolutely lethal. It's a weapon that we first use against ourselves and against, well, others. How? Well, others who don't subscribe to our narrative, to our views on things, which, by the way, are dictated by the views of the masses. Remember the tribe living in the cave? So people will suffocate, people will silence themselves, and what they feel should be said, given the state of affairs, given what's happening, for the sake of being accepted in the cave by these people to whom you rely, upon whom you rely. Otherwise, they're going to toss you out. So what happens then? You start to behave in ways that are not true, deceptive. You, at least deceptive to you. Or you hide your intentions, or you hide the truth that you see. This is where we start to lie. This is where we start to live untruthful lives. This is where the spiritual element starts to die out in us. People's capacities for certain abilities, for the divine qualities, if you will, to slowly seep out, because we don't have any room for them in our hearts, in our minds. The potential. People sometimes ask, how is it, Bhante, that we don't have those skills? If you say that we all have them intrinsically, it's there somewhere, so there's nothing like magical as such. But people have worked on them, trained in them, or practiced them. Well, we have not been using them. It's just, if you don't use it, you lose it. That is working, always in the background. So it's not enough for you to want something, you need to protect it. It's like the embers, when you're starting a fire, you protect it. You protect against the wind, too much wind, a little bit of oxygen is good, this and that, but you protect it with your palms, and then all of a sudden you add a little bit more, fibers, and then twigs, and then bigger pieces of wood, and then all of a sudden you have a beautiful fire to keep the whole, family, yourself warm. The body's warm. So there needs to be truthfulness in what is it that we are experiencing. Because you can easily muffle it out, you can easily silence the truth by speaking about something that is untrue. And this is dangerous given what has been happening. Apparently everybody stopped lying in the world, and there is suddenly now disinformation. What is that? I've always wondered about that. Disinformation, what is that? That is mangling a language, adding syntax, adding verbs, words, nouns, making up new words to hide the fact of the reality of an activity that is causing harm to oneself and others. There's no such thing as disinformation. There's lying, pure and simple. As if by tweaking the words, we have somehow minimized it, made it less than what it was. The dangerous qualities or the harmful qualities have somehow diminished, simply because we use the word misinformation, disinformation. This is ridiculous. So accountability is what we must be after. accountability of how do I live my life. At the end of the day, I have to answer to myself. This is something that the Buddha saw to be critically missing in the world. In fact, in the suttas, in the earliest suttas, we do find discourses in the Nikayas where we find Lord Buddha's teachings, in the Pali discourses, where Lord Buddha describes as to how it trickled down, the state of beings from higher to lower, to lower, to lower, to lowest. How did we... It all depended on this, the presence of ignorance and the wanting to hold on to things, and now you want to cherish and you want to protect. At what cost? Wanting to protect yourself from being tossed out of a cave has a price. The price is, I need to be loved and not loved, because love exists with truth. And when you are seeking acceptance, you're no longer talking about love. You're talking about simply being accepted by those around you. That person has something that you want and you're willing to pay the price. Where's love? What does love have to do with that? It's all about deceiving yourself, though. The other person also will know on some level that you are faking it, but they're okay with it because the outcome is that you are adding more numbers to them. You're echoing, you're voicing what they said. And that's fine. So you have a quasi-reality. In fact, it's not real anymore. It's a fake environment that you've created simply because you have sought, you have been seeking, longing for the approval of others, acceptance of others. Now be careful, because what happens is you have these so-called rebels who show up here and there because they start something, and they read something, and all of a sudden you have a way of looking at things, a view, a philosophical school suddenly, a way of thought, usually divorced of life and facts, but it's initiated and instigated and maintained by emotions, the agitated state of mind, and how you end up feeling. Again, that coziness, that when you see someone else saying the same thing, who, by the way, might have been influenced by something they saw somewhere else, being said similar to that. And all of a sudden they vibrate, or they start saying the same things as you, and birds of a feather flock together. That comes in. So no longer are you defending the truth, no longer are you stating the truth. You're simply functioning on an emotional drive to seek someone of the same mindset, or, quote-unquote vibration. Has nothing to do with facts. So this requires the person, however, if you notice, to be always on guard, to be on the saddle of discernment and accountability. Saying no, even if this person is a very close friend of yours, and you have decades of experience together, memories, this and that, wonderful experiences, etc., etc., and overall you agree to each other's views, but you see this big glitch, big issue in their position that is harmful, that is not well thought out, that is not based on the truth as you have experienced it. And you check then your own files, you check your own motives, your own reasons why you have that view, you have that position. So you see the accountability part that I'm referring to? But the easiest thing, instead of just being dragged into this intellectual affair of what is happening, what, when, this, that's too much. That's too much. You don't have to have running around doing that kind of analysis. You drop down to one simple thing. And that's what I was referring to as the Buddha discovered the importance of sila, virtue. Virtue doesn't lie. Virtue is always truthful. Virtue is always factual. Virtue is undeniable. Even though the world around you might come in and try to camouflage it, draw a fog, a mist over it. And the mist because the masses, the loudness in their voices, telling you something that is not true. And you know it's not true. And you're living with virtue. Why? Because you don't want to experience suffering. Because you know that if you do that thing which you know is harmful to someone else, that someone else could be you. When someone other than you is doing that same action, but to you, so you're on the receiving end. And you immediately realize, oh no, I don't like that to have happen to me. So you stop it right there with you. It doesn't go beyond. So you hold yourself steady, you hold yourself accountable, you hold yourself to a higher standard of living. Now sometimes the world around you is going to tell you that no, it's okay. You should in fact, you must in fact have these things. Otherwise, well, you're going to have a problem with us. But ultimately, you have to ask yourself, you might agree with this person, with this boss, with this employer, with this louder voice, the influential narrative, the thing that is in place, the thing that everybody is chiming and it's like a chorus going off and you are saying, excuse me, but this doesn't make sense. Like a few years ago with COVID. It was a mass hysteria. It was a mass, the whole thing was, there's so many holes in it. If you look at it, even with common sense, I'm not even saying applying the scientific method to look at what is happening and look at the evidence. There were so many pieces of evidence that were missing, through and through. You did have some things happening to people, yes, so that was that, but where's the evidence? Now this happens, as I said, in the case of health, in the case of politics, of course, that's always a big thing. But again, if you notice, the influencing of the masses is number one. And this is where whatever is put out is intended to steer the opinions of the masses in this way or that. Whoever has the most influence of exposure, that's what they do. That's why in ancient times, or even in, possibly in the world today, where there are communities of people who are separated and they don't have access to what's going on with the world, it's not a terrible thing. In fact, it might be a very good thing because you are also protected from all the, lying that's going on. The deceiving. So you become somewhat immune. So what influences are currently at play have everything to do with that old primal drive of ours, which seeks acceptance. Families were torn apart. In every single one of these, naughty historic events that have happened and have had an impact. Could have been a political, it could be ideological, it could be, like I mentioned with the COVID thing. Families were separated. People were like, I can't believe you're actually being so silly about this. We should go further back than this. What's happening here? Well, people wanted to adhere to an ideology. To be accepted in the neighborhood, you had to have a stance that is similar to the masses. I would see this even in when I would, obviously as a student in secondary school and in junior high, and then also in my students when I was a teacher. And I would see this in my students, teenagers, ganging up. They have these cliques, and I would notice how it was so almost like the phospholipid bilayer on a cell. Where you have the receptors and, proteins. I would see it like that because it's always changing. What's the trend nowadays? So whoever's popular today, tomorrow might change. But then I would see something else. Whoever is becoming loud in some way, all of a sudden they would gather around them. People would come. They are seeking resonance. Everyone. This is. You might even say it's a biological thing. It's beyond just cultural. It's biological. It's also seeking safety. Safety in numbers, as I was saying earlier. However, this is where wisdom, discernment has to come in, because we are more than that flimsy, fake sense of safety. That's why Lord Buddha says, if the wise person, virtuous person, intelligent person, decent person, tries and tries and tries to find like-minded individuals in one's life, and he or she is not able to, then it is much better for such a being to go off, walk alone, just like a royal tusker elephant, walking away from the craziness of the crowd into the jungle alone, and go on, live alone, practice your life, enjoy life with your own principles intact, and you will grow tremendously, exponentially, because there's no way, he says, to maintain or even keep company with a fool. And that's what we have, the majority. Why? Because, as I said, it's a trickle-down effect. Character is missing. Discipline is missing, because it takes discipline for you to say, wait a minute, this action that I'm thinking of committing basically, how will that impact me? And obviously, how will that impact others? So there's a social responsibility. This is different than seeking the acceptance of others, which is led by other things, ulterior motives. Truth doesn't have any ulterior motive. Truth is truth, through and through. It's beautiful, even if it's shocking. But it is shocking because of the suppressive energies, the suppressive attitudes that we've had against it. Otherwise, the sun rises every morning. The clouds come and cover, yeah, but the sun hasn't disappeared. It's there. It might be very, very thick, dark clouds blocking its rays from piercing through, yes, but the moment will come where it will open. There will be a tear in the cloud formation, and then you'll see the sun's rays shining through. But that's how it is with truth. That's how it is with virtue. When we want to join, when we want to really join in with life and take a stand, when we know that what we stand for is really truthful, is really valid, And it's not dictated by our impulses or insanity, like the case has been with society. People thinking of anything and all of a sudden tossing themselves into the world, the social media, this and that, and starting to yap and mouth things that you start squinting as like, is this even possible for a human being to be stooping this low? But that's what we have. Because the majority, in their quest to seek acceptance, have destroyed and have been destroying themselves and have been after destroying the destruction of society and civilization. So that's what I mean by it's a deadly weapon. The seeking of acceptance simply for those reasons. Not to feel alone. Not to feel like you're tossed out of the cave. By the way, when you're out of the cave, that's how life also began, because now you were not stuck in the cave and it's stagnant, stale, airless, dirty environment. You actually saw the sun. You went exploring and all of a sudden you're drinking fresh stream water. Oh, you're exploring and you see trees, they have fruits on them. You see different vistas, beautiful plateaus, mountains, this and that, different trees, animals. But the fear slowly dissipates because you're having new experiences coming in. So staying with the crowd always in that environment is also very harmful when you think of it. To the growth potential that is there. Now this doesn't mean that we should always leave the crowds. Yes, at certain intervals, yes, seclusion is a must. But think straight. To sit down with your data that you've collected, with your experiences, and say, okay, where am I here in the gauge of my happiness? How is my emotional well-being reservoir doing? How much do I feel okay and am I happy, basically? You have to take inventory of that, and you can only do that in seclusion. But you do that as you switch back and forth. So simply because you do not see the society around you agreeing with your principles, which again you have to make sure that they are truly valid, truthful, healthy principles that do not impinge upon anyone else's rights to live, etc. Those go without saying, of course. I mean, they're valid without saying, without mentioning. But once you have understood that, and then you see the society around you not resonating, therefore there is no acceptance. It could even be your family. That's okay. What if you're you are born or raised or surrounded by a family members that are not virtuous, that keep lying or deceiving or stealing, engaging in sexual misconduct, and it's okay? You have entire cultures that it's normal for them to go ahead and excuse the vulgarity of the language, but sleep around. And it's totally normal for them. In fact, it is expected. I've had people say that in my travels, and I was like, what? So immoral behavior, passionate, lustful behavior is totally expected. Not accepted, but expected even. So what if your principles don't agree with that because of what you have seen in life? That there's a life beyond such low behavior. lacking character, you stay away. So there is the dilemma that some people face. Well, which one is more important? Living with my values that I know are really noble, or go back to that world and say yes to them, which I don't agree with. Well, you came alone, you're going to go alone. The noble values have to not just subsist, not just continue or survive, but they have to flourish in you. So you can love them from afar. You don't have to get their acceptance. Because ultimately, when we think about it, it's very juvenile, it's very infantile, in fact, to seek the approval of others. Because it means that your opinion, your stance, your acceptance of you is not enough for you. You can't stand on your, two legs, apparently. You're not as important to you as the opinions of others. And that's a dreadful place to be. That's an unhappy place to be. And that's why you have a lot of people having so many emotional, psychological problems. Depression. Sadness. Go and ask everyone on the freeways, on the roads, anywhere in the world when they're going to work. Do you really want to do this? Many people have stopped asking that question of themselves. So ultimately it has to be happiness, I think. And what are you, or who are you doing this for? So it's inevitable, because not everyone has the same experiences. We're each different, right? So you will have some of us who will start asking questions, and they're not going to be satisfied with the status quo, with the normal narrative. We want to probe more deeper and see why. Why? Not to be argumentative or contentious, but simply to understand, is this true or not? Instead of being led by emotions, or what the emotional narrative is in the society. What's the soup du jour, as they say, soup of the day, as far as emotions and ideas are concerned. Instead, you're always, every morning you wake up, you're curious to know, to go deeper, to understand, to continue having happiness in your life. But then when you see that society as such is lagging behind, or this group of people are lagging behind because they're very comfortable where they are, and they're not willing to budge. So please don't go dragging yourself back into that cave of theirs and just, hiding yourself in some nook, some cranny somewhere in those cracks and the crevasses inside the cave, simply to be closer to the crowd. Countless are the people who are doing that, unfortunately. And that's why we have not been progressing as a society. We have been digressing. We have been, in fact, regressing. So, watch out for yourself. Protect yourself from this tendency to seek acceptance. It has its positive parts, as I mentioned. It allows you to grow and enhance those abilities that you have. It can, in the right environment, really allow you to flourish, and society as such also flourish with you. It's a wonderful thing. If the people around you are also of that caliber of authenticity, of nobility, of virtue, of integrity.